think we're good. Okay, next, our other long-term research project is the partial depth joint repairs, and Justin Lashley with Braun Intertech is going to fill us in on that project. Thanks, Justin.
I'm a little shorter. Thanks, Jerry. So my project's a little bit different, where it's kind of, I don't want to say more Minnesota focused, but kind of is, because I'm not going to be surveying other states and things like that. So we'll kind of go through about what the project tasks are. And as I was putting this together, I was trying to figure out how to present, because I could do a lot of pictures, but then trying to email it to get it in here would have been a pain. So we'll kind of do some talking and not a lot of pictures. But the task one, which happened last October, was the summary of the patch installation, some of the preparation, mixing procedures, placing procedures, and some curing procedures will be documented. And task two, which is what I think is going to be pretty important, is a manufacturer survey along with a literature review. And the reason I think the survey is very important is I heard a lot of, oh, this isn't the mixer we would use, we would do this a little differently, we would do this a little differently. And I was kind of thinking, but I kept it to myself, well, if you didn't like this mixer, you should have requested a different mixer. But as I'll show a couple pictures here, some guys brought their own mixer. And actually one local supplier, I think, rightly pulled the plug on placing that day, went and rented a mixer or brought one from their lab, and it mixed very well after that. So I'm a concrete guy, so I get kind of excited when I talk about concrete. So if I talk too fast, tell me to slow down. But that was what I thought was the most interesting of the installation, was all the different mixing procedures that everybody had. And you can use a revolving drum to even a little paddle drill mixer. So I thought that was really cool, how everybody had their own little way. So again, task 3 through 5 is a yearly review. We just went through the first winter, which I'll talk about. I went out last week and did what I'll call a quick survey, kind of informal, and observations and things like that. Going to go for 3 years, and then the final task would be the final report. So you would not believe how long I tried to change the color on the background of this to get it away from the gray, but I finally gave up after, I think it was an hour, and I said I can't do it, and it's doing it like 9 o'clock at night. So that it is what it is, but these are our typical patches. So we kind of had to jump around from joint to joint, so not every cell is laid out exactly this way, but this is what we have. And how these were generated was with a milling machine. So as we learned with that, especially on the full length, it got a little bigger than what everybody thought. So that was a challenge for some of the products, having a patch that size with heat generation and getting mixed enough in there. And again, I think that's going to be another important part of the survey, because 2 or 3 guys said, well, we have a bulk system. If you're doing big patches, you can use our bulk system and not this 5-gallon bucket or the bag system. So I think it's important to know what other, I'll say, sizes of materials they have for their products. So the installation was 16 products. This is where I had that extra slide. So again, as I talked about the varied mixing procedures, I did kind of smush these on here because I didn't want to promote a product in this presentation, although there's some more in the document. But you have a revolving drum. Again, one product wouldn't work with a revolving drum, so that they brought the next one there, which is what I call the paddle mixer or the mortar mixer. There was injection, where literally on some of these you throw aggregate in the patch and then inject or flow like a garden hose, as you can see. I don't have a pointer, but the top right one, all they're doing is flowing an epoxy product into the aggregate. Thought that was kind of neat. And again, the drill and paddle mixer there. And I thought this one was kind of neat, kind of in the middle with the grate. That's what I'll call a screw mixer. So this supplier actually kind of sells these kind of on the side, I guess, to use for their products, but it'll work with a lot of other products too. Attaches to a skid steer, or bobcat is how I grew up, so what we called them. So, and it mixes it right in there. So I think that's kind of neat. It worked very well for the size of these patches. They basically had a pallet of 20 some bags. They broke them all in there, added some water, mixed it all up. There's a little chute, almost like a ready mix truck, that this material just comes down and goes into the patch. There was some products that were just straight compaction. You put it in there, and one guy actually, I think he was needed a Snickers bar. He was getting a little short-tempered, but all he did was put his in there and hopped in his truck and drove back and forth over it several times. But you could use a tamper or things like that. And then the bottom one, and again, some of this is my opinion, so I'm going to be a little biased. Not apologizing for that, but take it with a grain of salt. This is, I believe, the districts have these to place mastic material on bridge decks, but this is heated about 400 degrees, that very bottom photo. So I thought that was kind of dangerous to have on a patching project and trying to keep everything that hot to lay down this little patch. But it came out pretty cool. It was kind of neat to see, but that's something to think about that'll be in the report. Again, what type of equipment do you need to place this stuff? And what type of safety and precautions do you have to have? So a lot of the except for the epoxy versus what I'll call cementitious or your conventional concrete, the placing and finishing procedures were about all the same. You know, if it was a concrete material, you had your normal concrete tools, trowel, things like that. The epoxy product, you didn't really finish, just kind of placed it and let it flow and maybe struck it off. And that's about it. And for epoxy, you don't really cure it. But for this project, we used kind of what I'll call plastic sheets for curing. And the reason I'll call that because it was the wrap around of a lot of the pallets. We didn't actually use, like if I would specification, like a 6 mil poly. So that's why I say kind of plastic sheets. So did go out there through the first winter. There is one product that I wouldn't consider it a failure. It is a failure. It's coming out very badly. I believe probably, and again, speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for the DOT or Minroad, will probably have to be tore out and replaced this year because I don't think it'll survive another winter. And I think that's mainly due to the snowplows. That product was not locally, but it was a compacted product and just tore out. I mean, I can lift my fingers under some of the material that's still there and I'm pulling up on it. Didn't pull too hard, but it's ready to come out. So that's going to have to be tore out and replaced. And this is what I thought was real interesting. Did some chain dragging sounding. A lot of the patches are delaminated. So I don't know what that means at this point in time. Because you can clearly hear it, but kind of my Justin Lashley hammer test, it still felt pretty good. So as we get here more into a more thorough review, might take a little coring rig out with me and see if I can epoxy a puck and do a pull test and see if it's going to pull off. But the one thing I noticed when we were doing the patches, that the concrete is in pretty rough shape. It was undermined, so that's where I don't know if the delamination is coming from the patch or if it's from underneath the patch and the original substrate concrete. I just don't know yet, but I was very interested by that. Yo.
Is somewhere coming along here to reiterate that these are 3 to 5 year repairs, maintenance?
Yes.
Patches?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry to steal your thunder.
No, that's okay. And again, it's probably not in here, but thank you for reminding me. But again, so one material's gone after the first winter, and Helix, I don't think they're in the room. One thing I noticed, they used a product at the very first patch installed, and some of the last ones was the same material with the Helix fibers. And I would say that I notice a difference in the cracking of that material with the Helix steel fibers. It is definitely noticeable. It's a lot less cracking. So yeah, we're not looking for 20 years out of this. Are we getting 1 year, or are we going to get 3 or 5, or with some of these products, do we actually get 10? And maybe that's something we want to look at. But another thing too is this is mostly with the epoxy products. A lot of them broadcast some aggregate while it was still kind of, I'll say wet, or maybe soft is the term to use, but just for traction purposes, so slip resistance. And again, most of that broadcast aggregate has been, well, I'll say tore off after the first winter with the snowplow. Don't know if it's that big a deal for some of these patches. I mean, I don't think some of them are even you're over it with your tires so quick. I don't know if it would even show up if you did a slip test because it's a smaller patch. So I don't know if that's that major of a thing. It's just an observation that I noticed out on site. I think some of these materials are from areas where maybe snowplows aren't used, and maybe they don't have experience with that. So I just thought that was an interesting observation when I was out there. So pulling it all together, and maybe this is where it was going to be Maria's, can the repair be done quickly, and how long can it be expected to last? So one of the survey is what would you like to see done with the patch? If we have to get a sandblast crew out there or a cutting crew to get rid of some of the feathering of just throwing material in a patch, well, that's not really going to work, because instead of being able to go out and throw material in it and have it open in 2 hours, now we got half a day's worth of work to prepare the patch before we do it. Going to ignore that, I assume.
Yeah.
X.
Either one.
And then what is the equipment needing to repair the patch material? So there, again, this is my opinion. There was kind of a guy there, I kind of didn't like him at first. He seemed like a total salesman. And after I thought about it, I think I just needed a Snickers bar, if you remember those commercials. I think I just needed a little something to eat. I was getting a little shaky, a little angry. And after I talked to the guy, he was a really nice guy. He knew his product. What I thought was really cool was it all came in a 5-gallon bucket. So it's totally contained in that 5-gallon bucket. You open the bucket, there's material sitting in there. There's 2 bags of other material, and you pour them together and you mix it up with a bucket. And he's one of the guys that does have the bulk system. So let's say you have 10 patches in 100 yards. Well, if you get 10 guys out there and they all have a 5-gallon bucket, you can kind of go to town pretty quick on that. And, maybe it's 5 guys. So I thought that was a pretty good product for, $200 for a drill mixer. You can do a lot of small patches with that material. And then again, if a revolving drum mixer is not going to work, does that mean we have to go buy paddle mixers or mortar mixers, or will it work in a revolving drum? Like I said, one product just didn't work. They finally pulled the plug and got the paddle mixer. And I was surprised that I thought it would look rough and maybe segregate, but it just wouldn't mix. You couldn't get any slump out of it, no matter how much water you put in it. And then again, does some training need to take place? And we got a question here.
For that one, did you follow the instructions?
The manufacturer was there doing the mixing. So I think that's probably the best way I can answer that question. And finally said, you know what? I think we need a paddle mixer because it's just not going to work, because we never mix it in this revolving drum mixer. So, and again, with the patches getting deeper, there was one product that is not meant for these deeper patches. And I would have bet $100 that I would have went out and that product would have been tore off, because it just set up too high. So it was set up too quick. And in the patch, it was about 2 inches higher than the rest of the road. It survived the winter. I couldn't believe it. I said I would bet $100 that it would have been tore out, but it survived. But again, that was one of the guys, once they kind of got into it and said, hey, let's pause. We have a product that's better for this depth of patch than what we're using now. So, but it made the winter, so that's good. And does training need to be placed or take place for some of the crews? But a lot of it, again, just the mixing was the big difference between the products. And then if there's questions, feel free to do it. And I will mention my vacation starts about 15 minutes after I'm done with this presentation. So Jerry and I were talking. I'm from Southern Indiana, is where I was born and raised, and taking my family back to see the rest of my family back there. But looks like maybe we had somebody who wanted to ask something.
Yeah, what sort of set times are you getting with these products? What kind of a range that is?
They're all quick set.
How quick is quick?
15 minutes maybe.
Okay.
So, and we do some work for some of the manufacturers, and basically even in a 5-gallon bucket, if you don't have 5 people ready to go, you're throwing the bucket out and trying again. So yeah, a lot of it's quick set. Now, there's a difference between set time and opening time, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of them in the temperatures where we were doing them, which was about 70-ish, something like that, a lot of them were saying, hour, some were 45 minutes, that type of thing. So
You mean drivable?
drivable, yeah. Well, that's what I mean by opening, letting car traffic on it. So.
Okay. Did you have any that were drivable in 15 minutes?
Well, the compaction products, in my opinion, would be drivable as soon as you were done.
Okay.
But and some of the guys were talking about, we got ways to speed it up if you really want to speed it up. I think you're going to just hurt the crew trying to work with it if you try to speed it up more than what it was. So, because again, some of them, they could not get finished because they set up too quick. And a lot of the products you can use a retarder with if it's 90 out too. They have a little package you can buy with some things to help you get it placed.
Yeah. So ideally, from your perspective, what is sort of the optimal product, I guess, in terms of set and opening?
Well, it depends. If I'm doing a small patch in a 5-gallon bucket, if it sets in 10 minutes, that's enough. I mean, you're 3 minutes of mixing in that bucket, pour it in, 10 minutes it's set, and then open it in half hour, 45 minutes. So, but I think it just depends. And that's going to be the interesting thing, I think, is you're going to find different products for different size of patches. So again, that wholly contained 5-gallon bucket for a small patch, I mean, that's pretty nice to be able to just grab a 5-gallon bucket off the truck and set it down and go to town, versus having to break a bag into a 5-gallon bucket, maybe add some aggregate to it, that type of thing. So I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all.
And how long are you on vacation?
I come back Wednesday.
Oh, contact you later.
Yeah. Oh, you can shoot me an email. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you have cost range of the materials?
That's going to be part of the survey. Is say their cost per bag, that type of thing. So it's going to vary widely. Obviously, anytime you hear the word epoxy, that means a lot of money. But if you get 3 more years out of it, it's only double the price, might be worth it. That's going to be kind of some of the, I'll say, the information given to Jerry to help people make decisions on what product to use. Does that answer your question? It's coming, I guess. Don't have that yet. Anything else? Well, thank you, everybody.